Welcome to Think Tangle, where we unravel the complex threads of global events. The war in Ukraine has dominated headlines and shaped global consciousness, often presenting a clear-cut narrative, Ukraine as the good guy and Russia as the bad one. But is it truly that simple? Or are there deeper forces at play, shaping our perceptions and influencing how we understand this devastating conflict? In this first episode of our two-part series, The Narrative Battlefield, Deconstructing Good versus Evil in the Ukraine-Russia War, we're going to dive deep into the philosophical and psychological reasons behind these powerful perceptions. We'll explore how ancient ideas about just war apply to modern conflict, and then pull back the curtain on the sophisticated psychological tactics used by all sides. We'll examine the role of propaganda, how our own minds are susceptible to cognitive biases, and even the unsettling phenomenon of geopolitical gaslighting that twists reality. Get ready to challenge your assumptions and gain a nuanced understanding of the invisible battle being fought for hearts and minds. This isn't just about what's happening on the ground, it's about what's happening in our heads. Before we begin, if you're ready to explore complex topics with us, hit that subscribe button for Think Tangle and let us know in the comments what you hope to learn from this series. The ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia has deeply shaped how people around the world see things. Many tend to view Ukraine as the good guy and Russia as the bad one. This clear-cut story is especially common in Western news and public discussions where Ukraine's side is often highlighted and Russia's perspective is either downplayed or presented in a very negative way. Surveys show that most people in democratic countries have a very unfavorable view of Russia. 3. This report aims to look beyond these simple labels, offering a deeper understanding of how these perceptions are formed and maintained, using ideas from philosophy and psychology. To truly understand this, we need to look at how stories are built, how people are influenced, and the long history and global power struggles that shape our views. The very question, why Ukraine is consistently seen as good and Russia as bad, points to a basic human tendency to simplify complicated situations into clear moral choices. This simplification helps us psychologically. It reduces confusion and gives us a clear moral stance, which brings a sense of order and comfort when things are chaotic. The strong support for this narrative in Western public opinion, where a large majority of adults in 18 countries surveyed had no confidence in Russia's President Vladimir Putin shortly after the invasion, shows how effective it is. Because people naturally prefer clear moral categories, they are easily influenced by information campaigns that offer such simple stories, even if the full facts are much more complex. This report will explore the application of just war theory to the conflict, the intricate world of propaganda and cognitive biases, the phenomenon of geopolitical gaslighting, the enduring legacy of the Cold War, the contentious role of NATO expansion, and the broader dynamics of global power. 2. The moral compass, just war theory, and the conflict, Ukraine's defense. A just cause from a philosophical perspective, the idea of a just war helps us decide if a conflict is morally right. Just war theory, especially its rules for starting a war, called jus ad bellum, is often used to analyze the Ukraine-Russia conflict. The main philosophical argument is that Ukraine's war against Russia is a perfect example of a just war of defense against unfair aggression. This view comes from the fact that Russia's invasion was unprovoked, starting in February 2022, though its roots go back to 2014. Ukraine's war is considered just for several specific reasons. Russia's clear goal, mainly driven by Putin, is to conquer Ukraine, take its land, and absorb its people. This includes the illegal takeover of Crimea in 2014 and the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson regions in 2022. Ukraine's fight is fundamentally about its survival as a nation and its right to govern itself. 8. The moral clarity of self-defense, a core principle of just war theory, immediately makes it clear who is morally responsible when one independent nation invades another with goals of conquest. The invaded nation's right to defend itself becomes morally undeniable. This clear moral position easily supports the good guy story for Ukraine, as it aligns with universal feelings about defending, one's home, people, and existence. This philosophical basis makes the Ukraine good narrative strongly resonate with many international observers. The direct link here is that Russia's unprovoked attack, a clear violation of the rules for starting a war, directly gives Ukraine the justified right to self-defense, fulfilling those rules and thus creating a strong moral foundation for the good guy narrative. Russia's aggression, why it doesn't meet just war standards. On the other hand, Russia's war is seen as unjust, according to just war principles. Its stated reasons, such as expanding the Russian Empire to its historical borders and preventing Ukraine from becoming a thriving democracy, are not considered valid reasons for war. These reasons echo past imperial ambitions and a fear of other former Soviet states adopting Western culture and democracy. Russia has also been documented violating international law through its invasion and committing war crimes against Ukrainians. Russia's extreme demands for peace further solidify its unjust status in the eyes of the world. These demands include international legal recognition of Moscow's 2014 annexation of Crimea and its 2022 annexation of the 4 Ukrainian regions, Ukraine's declaration of neutrality, giving up its goal to join NATO, limits on its armed forces, recognition of Russian as an official language, and a ban on glorification and propaganda of Nazism and neo-Nazism. These conditions reflect Putin's initial goals for the invasion, which Kiev and its Western allies strongly reject as false accusations, especially regarding neo-Nazism. The deep and unresolvable difference between Russia's internal story and how its actions are seen externally is clear here. The international community largely views these justifications as excuses for an illegal act of aggression rather than legitimate reasons for war. This ongoing difference makes it extremely difficult for Russia to gain international legitimacy or widespread support for its actions, especially among democratic nations, thereby reinforcing its portrayal as the bad guy on the global stage. The tricky ethics of outside help. While Ukraine's defensive war is widely seen as just help from outside powers, even when driven by moral reasons, brings up significant complications and ethical dilemmas. These include whether it's right to impose economic sanctions that might harm civilians and to provide weapons, including controversial types like cluster munitions. There's a moral duty to help save lives in a democratic neighbor under attack from an authoritarian regime. And it's also in the self-interest of European countries to uphold their values and prevent threats to European security. Philosophers like Slavoj Zizek challenge the idea that this is a proxy war, meaning Ukraine is just fighting for NATO. Zizek argues that for Ukrainians, the conflict is a fight for their very existence, not just a proxy battle for outside interests. He also criticizes false pacifism, calling it a too simple view of war as meaningless violence that fails to grasp why resistance is necessary for Ukraine's survival. While some argue that extensive U.S. involvement might prolong the war and increase casualties, others emphasize that Ukraine's current ability to negotiate, if any, is a direct result of its continued resistance and vital Western support. A key paradox emerges here. While Ukraine's defensive war is widely considered just, the involvement of outside powers, even when driven by moral reasons, introduces significant complexities and ethical questions. Providing military and financial aid while enabling Ukraine's defense can also be argued to prolong the conflict and worsen human suffering. This creates a situation where a just cause, Ukraine's survival, is supported by actions outside aid sanctions that themselves have unclear moral implications, such as civilian harm or the continuation of violence. The ongoing debate about whether this is a proxy war highlights this tension, where strategic interests and moral duties become intertwined. This raises important questions about the ethical limits of intervention. How do nations balance their moral obligations with the strategic and human costs of long-term involvement? And how do these complex considerations shape public perception of their own goodness or the goodness of their actions? Third, the mind's battlefield, how we see and are influenced, propaganda and information warfare, how stories are Built information warfare is a strategic area where biased or fake stories are used to influence public opinion, destroy trust, and create division. These stories are spread through traditional news, social media, and online platforms. This type of warfare aims to confuse the enemy, distract from real threats, and weaken alliances through false information. Russia's denazification and dehumanization stories. Russia's main propaganda stories include the claim that Ukraine is full of Nazis and needs denazification, a justification given by Vladimir Putin on the day of the invasion. 13. This is combined with the systematic dehumanization of Ukrainians through insults and degrading language, like calling them cockroaches. These stories are clearly manufactured, with their presence on social media sharply increasing right after the 2022 invasion, showing a coordinated effort. Russia also uses memory politics by cynically connecting the current special military operation to the Soviet Union's victory in the Great Patriotic War, WWPURA. This strategy aims to create a sense of an endless fight against Nazism, thereby justifying the invasion and gaining support at home. This denazification story, 1213, is much more than a simple lie. It represents a deliberate and cynical attempt to use the deep historical trauma and collective memory of World War II within the Russian population as a weapon. By falsely labeling Ukrainians as Nazis, Russia taps into a powerful, emotionally charged historical narrative of a righteous struggle and victory over evil. This framing serves to invalidate Ukraine's very existence and its resistance, while also dehumanizing the other group, Ukrainians, making violence against them seem morally acceptable or even necessary. This strategy aims to create a story that feels logical and morally right for the Russian people, even when it's widely refuted and condemned by the international community. It shows the profound power of rewriting history and manipulating emotions in shaping perceptions of good and bad within a country. Furthermore, Russia uses simulacra and fakes to hide the truth and deny terrible acts, like the bombing of the Mariupol maternity hospital or the Bucha massacre. This involves offering many conflicting versions of events or simply making up stories to confuse and mislead its audience. For example, regarding the Mariupol hospital, Russian propaganda claimed there were no staff and women in labor, but there were Azov soldiers, or that the right sector fighters bombed the maternity hospital. The killing of civilians in Bucha was presented as a planned media company by the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukraine's smart communication. Being real and showing identity. Ukraine's communication strategy is based on the saying, if you don't tell your own story, someone else will tell it for you. This involves telling stories in real time on digital platforms, focusing on being authentic, and using humor and memes as ways to resist and communicate. Ukrainian officials have shown creativity. For example, launching a viral campaign where Ukrainians shared pictures of themselves wearing leopard print to encourage allies to send leopard tanks. Ukraine's patriotic story is seen as a connecting strategic narrative, largely created by the emotional public on social media. This decentralized grassroots approach emphasizes unity in society and national identity, making it very effective in engaging its own people. 19. Ukraine's relative success in the information war comes from its ability to use an authentic and real-time storytelling approach. 17. Often driven by the emotional public and participation from ordinary people. This is a sharp contrast to Russia's more centralized, top-down, and manufactured stories. 16. The widespread use of digital platforms and social media in modern conflicts favors stories that genuinely connect with real experiences and emotional truth, Ukraine's approach, over those that rely on obvious fabrication and rewriting history, Russia's approach. This suggests a clear shift in modern warfare from traditional centralized propaganda to more decentralized, emotionally resonant, and publicly generated digital stories. This indicates that in contemporary conflicts, the establishment of a good guy narrative is not solely about moral righteousness. but critically depends on effective, authentic communication strategies that skillfully leverage digital platforms and foster broad public participation. Ukraine also actively engaged in pre-bunking, where officials systematically released intelligence and disproved Russian false information even before the invasion, helping to control the story and prevent the Kremlin from shaping initial perceptions. 21. How our minds work. Biases and moral disengagement. Information warfare cleverly uses our natural mental shortcuts, known as cognitive biases. These include confirmation bias, which is our tendency to look for and interpret information that confirms what we already believe, while ignoring anything that contradicts it. The bandwagon effect, where people believe something simply because many others do. And selective attention, where emotionally charged content grabs our focus, making it harder to think critically. Social media algorithms make these biases worse by creating echo chambers, where we only hear opinions similar to our own and reinforcing existing views, leading to filter bubbles, where we are exposed only to information that confirms our beliefs, and resistance to checking facts. Moral disengagement, a concept developed by psychologist Albert Bandura, refers to the mental process by which individuals intentionally turn off their internal moral compass. This allows them to do or support unethical actions without feeling shame or guilt. It's a step that makes future unethical acts seem morally acceptable. 23. Specific ways moral disengagement is used in pro-Russian narratives to justify the war and maintain a sense of moral superiority include 15. Moral justification. Aggressive actions are reframed as morally right by highlighting supposed benefits or noble goals, such as protecting Eastern European religious cultural heritage or portraying Putin as a savior. An example includes stories suggesting Putin's actions are to save us from NATO and the EU. Advantageous comparison. Violent behavior is made to seem less bad by comparing it to the actions of more extreme or threatening groups, or by shifting blame to others. This includes using double standards. If I am a war criminal, what are the American presidents from Nixon onwards? Bringing up forgotten victims, e.g. Vietnam War atrocities by the US, or portraying Ukrainian President Zelensky as a puppet of the USA, or 23. Dehumanization. The opposing group, such as Azov fighters, is described as less than human. Scoundrels, they should be shot. None should be captured alive, to make violence against them seem reasonable. Nationalism and group superiority. Prioritizing nationalistic values makes supporting the war seem legitimate, framing it as a supreme duty of self-preservation. This includes expressing patriotism and warning against perceived threats to national security. Conspiracy theories. Relying on conspiracy theories aims to uncover the truth about the war, fostering distrust in official news sources and absolving Russia of responsibility. Stories suggesting the war is a fabricated scheme for financial gain, or that Western institutions are to blame, are common. These methods, including moral justification, advantageous comparison, and dehumanization, allow individuals to support war and its destructive activities while still seeing themselves as decent and moral. The widespread use of moral disengagement tactics, 15, 22, 23, provides a crucial psychological framework for understanding how individuals and groups can support or carry out actions widely condemned as immoral. By systematically reframing actions, using favorable comparisons, and dehumanizing the other group, Ukrainians the West, individuals create an other against whom harmful actions become psychologically acceptable. This process isn't just about external propaganda. It involves deep internal psychological work to maintain a positive self-image and a sense of moral goodness, even while supporting aggression. The spread of conspiracy theories, 15, further reinforces this by providing alternative realities that effectively absolve the in-group of responsibility and shift blame. Understanding these deep-seated psychological mechanisms is vital for breaking down the simple good-bad story. It reveals the complex internal and external processes that allow both sides to see themselves as good and the other as bad, often regardless of external judgments or objective facts. This highlights how subjective moral perception is in conflict, geopolitical gaslighting. Twisting reality. Geopolitical gaslighting is a psychological manipulation technique used in aggressive information warfare. Its goal is to confuse and destabilize targets by making them doubt their own reality, eventually leading them to give in. This is done through lying, misdirection, and constant denial. Russia has used clear examples of gaslighting in the Ukraine conflict. When little green men, unmarked Russian soldiers, appeared in Crimea, Russia denied their presence. Similarly, when pro-Russian militias emerged in Ukraine, Moscow claimed they appeared spontaneously seeking independence, even as Russian military forces were mobilizing. Broader disinformation campaigns against Western democracies also show this tactic. A key Russian propaganda tactic is the rapid-fire conspiracy overload method, identified by Zarina Zabriskie. This involves promoting an overflow of images of violent protests, vandalism, fire, injuries, deaths, to shock the nervous system and cause stress. The quick switching of stories and inconsistencies are designed to cause depression, panic, fear, and confusion, ultimately making critical thinking and rational action difficult. The use of geopolitical gaslighting, 24, and the rapid-fire conspiracy overload method, 16, by Russia isn't just about spreading false information. Their deeper strategic goal is to systematically undermine the target audience's ability to recognize truth, trust their own perceptions, and think critically. This deliberate erosion of a shared, objective reality aims to create widespread confusion, hinder effective decision-making, and ultimately make populations more vulnerable to the aggressor's twisted stories. The effectiveness of gaslighting significantly contributes to the ongoing presence of conflicting narratives on the global stage. It makes it extremely challenging for outside observers to form a clear, objective understanding of the conflict, thereby blurring the lines of good and bad for those caught in the information crossfire. That wraps up Episode 1, where we've explored the philosophical and psychological battlegrounds of this conflict. What are your initial thoughts on how narratives are constructed and perceived? Share your views with us in the comments below. And, if you're finding this deep dive valuable, make sure to subscribe to Think Tangle for more in-depth analyses of complex global issues.